Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
Back again from Square Peg Consulting. We are so happy to welcome Kate Panaccione back to the show. How are you?
Well, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing great. Would you mind just introducing yourself to our viewers and listeners today?
Sure. I'm Kate Panaccione, and I'm the owner of a consulting company called Square Peg Consulting. And I do special education consulting.
Great.
So I'm hired when people have questions or issues with anything that involves special needs or disabilities.
Great. And just to start, how could we find you? What is your contact information?
My business, you can find me at squarepeged.com. You can also reach me by email at kate@squarepeged.com or by phone at 603-828-6179.
Great. So tell us a little bit more about your company to start, if you don't mind, Kate.
Sure. Special education consulting is for a bunch of different reasons. It depends on who is calling. But I help solve problems that arise, as they often do, with individuals that have disabilities, either children or adults.
Great. And now if you have been an educator and an administrator for so many years, why not just continue to work in a school district like you have in the past, in a sense?
Well, I did enjoy it. I worked in school districts. I mean, I have a career of over 30
Wow.
years. So I have enjoyed working in school districts and have learned an incredible amount, worked with wonderful people. But I really like the flexibility that consulting offers me. At this point, I feel like I'm able to have more impact with the job that I do now, rather than working with a specific school district or a specific set of issues. I'm actually impacting larger issues, including legislation.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you exactly. Who hires you?
There's different people that hire me. It depends on who's contacting me. Parents can hire me, although that part of my business has really been cut down because I'm very busy in the other aspects. I get hired by school districts for trainings and things like that. I get hired by attorneys often for special education cases that could be many different things.
Yeah. And now with the school district, why would a school district hire you, for example? What types of things would you be able to do for them as a whole?
I do lots of different things for school districts. Sometimes needs come up that are temporary needs for a school district. They might be overwhelmed with evaluations at a certain time of the year, or they might have a really difficult case that they need assistance with. And so they hire me to come in and consult. And that way they aren't hiring an individual full time, and they don't have a benefited position and so forth. I also have done lots of professional development trainings for teachers, and I have, I'm trying to think of what I've done. I guess I've done a lot of
with the professional developments, right? So could you give us some example of what types of professional development have you done exactly with schools in the past? That might be helpful.
Yes, I've done lots of training with teachers. If a teacher needs coaching, special education is really complicated, and it takes a long time to understand all the nuances and to understand what to look for when you're identifying a child. What does a child with a disability look like in a classroom? How do you tell? So I work with new teachers sometimes to help coach them through and help them understand the learning needs of their classrooms. I've also done workshops for parent trainings. Special educators are typically a very busy lot. They often have after-hour meetings, and so school districts might hire me to do a parent training series. Where I talk to parents about global issues that affect all children with special education needs, how to support their child in the community and at home. So I've done that. I have also done some some assessments specific to behavioral needs for individuals in school districts. Children communicate differently than adults, and it's, as we all know, often by behavior that they communicate they're frustrated or that they don't understand. If a child is completely fluxumined with whatever it is that they're learning, they might just sweep all of the things off their desk, and after a while that can snowball, and teachers see it more and more often as a child falls further and further behind in school. Also, if they have home circumstances that are difficult, some children, they have parents that work and they come home to an empty house and there's nobody there to help them.
Hmm.
So that might make them fall a little bit further behind.
Okay.
That's not to say that parents that have to work are in any way not offering the same opportunities to their child. They are. It's just that the child doesn't have that outlet for frustration, and it comes out sometimes in the classroom.
Got it. Wow. Thank you for sharing that. Now, did you want to elaborate on that more before I ask my next question?
No,
State governments, you mentioned that you've done work with them. Could you explain exactly what you do for the government that has to do with special education? And also, you're in, what is it, New Hampshire?
yes.
Do you
Yeah.
work strictly in your state or do you work out of state as well?
No, I work out of state as well. I work across the country.
Okay, great.
Actually, it's not confined to a state. I've actually even worked overseas.
Wow.
Um, but for typically when I'm working for state governments, they hire me for projects as well. Something that needs a specific attention that may not be long lasting.
Okay.
It might be reviewing policies at the state level to see if states are meeting the needs of children with special education. Sometimes it's reviewing statistics to look for where states might be missing students, where we can capture more children to make sure that they get the best education possible. I also sometimes consult for states that have high cost individuals in their states.
What is that exactly?
That's that's for children or adults that have really severe needs. They have lots of medical issues. They have just maybe they might be fragile, medically fragile, and so their education has to happen in an environment that is more contained than a classroom. And so they might hire me to set up programming for something like that. I've also set up special purpose private schools for a state that was in a hospital setting. And that happens when states have children that aren't safe. For example, they're going to hurt themselves or they're going to hurt somebody else, and there's no place for these children to go. They still need to learn.
Yeah.
They still have to be educated. So sometimes they end up in hospitals or hospital emergency rooms, which isn't appropriate. So I sometimes develop programs for states for children that are of the highest needs, that need a really restrictive environment.
And can I ask you what got you into this field? Why are you so passionate about helping those, especially children with special needs? Would you mind just sharing that?
Um, Well, for a couple of reasons. First off, is obviously just compassionately. I, as a teacher, have seen children struggle with learning, and I understand that as well. I mean, I was a terrible student in elementary school and high school. I really was. It wasn't until I was in graduate school that I started to excel. I didn't do well in the confines of a typical classroom setting.
Hmm.
And I think that made me want to go into finding a way to make it easier for those children that struggle. You
Great.
know, there's so many ways to help them. That's I think why I went into this.
Great. Would you mind explaining to me the fact that you've been an expert witness before? Can you explain how that works and, what exactly does an expert in the special education do? Would you mind sharing some of your experiences with that?
Sure. A lot of what I do with cases is I get hired by attorneys that call me up and they want help with a case. Sometimes children get hurt while they're at school. Sometimes they get hurt when they're on the school bus. So it could be an accident related issue. There's also issues with adults as well with developmental disabilities that require those lifelong services. They sometimes, if they are in the community, things might happen that are unexpected, and they could damage property out of fear, or a number of issues that can come up. Just like for everybody in everyday life, things come up for individuals with disabilities the same way. It's just that their disability impacts that differently. So they need attorneys to sort of help. My expertise offers why an individual might behave in a particular way,
Hmm.
or if it's considered normal behavior under those circumstances or with that particular disability for the individual to respond in a
Hmm.
specific way. So I offer my expert opinion on that kind of thing.
Got it. Any other examples that you want to share without using names, but any cases in particular that really stand out to you that you were an expert witness, you were called upon to be an expert witness?
Every one of them, I think, is remarkable in some way. Unfortunately, some of them are incredibly tragic and sad and end with the death of an individual with disability. Um, it happens, just like tragic accidents happen to everybody.
Yeah.
Specific cases, I don't give details to because individuals with disabilities are covered protection. Their identity is
Okay.
protected under the American with Disabilities Act, and
Mhm.
also all under HIPAA rules, which are the healthcare compliance rules for privacy. So when these cases come to court, it's typically you don't see the individual's name,
Mhm.
but you see the initials or the person who is bringing the suit for them.
Okay. Got
Yeah.
it. And what else did you want to share in regards to here, with our time today? Obviously, we're going to talk more about how we can get in touch with you, but would you mind sharing a little bit more details about how, people out there listening right now can benefit from your services, whether they have a special needs child or know someone? How do we advocate for people like you?
There's lots of things that people can do. I think that everybody's family is impacted by someone that has special needs. Learning needs happen with increased frequency. And not just that, but the emotional needs of children has really skyrocketed, especially these last few years with COVID and online learning. Online learning poses its own individual set of challenges for children with special needs or for children that have attentional issues and they're sitting in front of a screen. We all know what that's like if we have to work in front of a screen for 8 hours a day. It's exhausting. And, you can't just send that child out to recess with a bunch of other children to work off all of their energy. So that's something that has caused an increased need in services. School districts um, have been calling to seek assistance with bringing the children that have special needs. Their learning has fallen at a greater rate than the general population, and that's concerning. And that's because of all of those special challenges that we talked about. Oftentimes, children that have special needs have other services besides just extra help in math or reading or whatever it happens to be. Sometimes they have speech therapy or occupational therapy if they have difficulty with fine motor skills. All of that has to be coordinated to meet all of these children. And instead of the therapist, going into all of those homes, which would be an inordinate amount of time, they're having to come up with really creative ways. And so I've been contacted by school districts to assist with some of that.
Right.
Um,
Well, also, is there advice out there for parents that may need help with their children? What are some of the things that maybe we should be looking for?
Well, parents should always be looking for if their child's frustrated in school. That's the big tip off. If you have a child that comes home and complains about school,
Okay.
no matter what the reason, maybe they're having difficulty on the playground, maybe they have somebody that sits next to them that's driving them crazy. If a child's frustrated, it usually means it's because there's a problem, and parents should ask questions about that. And school districts are tasked with a lot these days. It's not just education in the typical academic sense, where we're teaching, learning math and reading and writing, but it's also that emotional piece of it, the social piece of it.
And what are some of the identifiers that would stand out to a parent if they're watching or listening in regards to behavioral issues? Maybe they're, not even aware that it's their first child, let's say, so they're not sure where their child is supposed to be. Any things that stand out, like you mentioned earlier about maybe throwing things on the desk in school, but like frustration. What are some of the signs at home that maybe parents can look for?
What happens often, I hear about this often from parents, is that a child holds it together really well during the school day,
Okay.
and you don't hear any problems reported from the teacher. But they come home and they finally feel like they can relax and let their guard down, and they are terror when they walk through the door.
Yeah.
That's an indicator that your child's struggling at school, and that maybe you need to have some conversations with the teacher to find out what it is, and conversations with your child to say, tell me exactly, what do you not like? And some of the answers that children give are amazing. You've got to love their frankness. They might just tell you, I can't stand that the girl's hair in front of me, she flips it all the time and it goes back and it hits me in the face. You never know what they're going to come up with. And it might be something that's very simple to fix. It might be something that's a little bit harder, and that's when you need to get some more help.
Got it. It's funny because I have a kindergartner, and this past year, when we would do homework together, it was always a struggle. It was a battle. And he would yell and scream. And I called the teacher. I said something wrong. She's like, he's a great student. I don't know. She's like, it's just parents. I'm like, what? She's like, sometimes it's just you there. Now, so I'm thinking there was a behavioral issue, and she's swearing he's fine. He's going to be defiant to you. That's what they do. But I'm like, when do you know if it's too much defiancy? And then it turned out to be more of, well, we think he wants to be more independent. So she says, you got to learn your technique, step away, let him try to do it first. And as a first time parent of a child in school, I was too overbearing. So it's a learning curve for both parents and children for sure. And as I noticed, it did get better when I just gave him the space and wasn't on top of him thinking I had to be teacher like. What did I know?
Yeah, yeah, it's true. We all make those mistakes with our first child. And it usually helps to take the battle out of homework. Don't ever fight your child about homework, because they will win every time, every time. And the way to take the battle out of it is to just set different parameters for them instead. Offer a reward if they get it done, something they really, really want. And if it's someone that, like, if it's a child that's in kindergarten, those rewards have to be really immediate. They
Yeah,
can't be, I will bring you to the park later. They
it's
need to be something that's immediate.
yes.
And you can also say, okay, well, if they've done everything but their homework still, then you just say, I'm sorry, you need to stay there until it's done. If you need help, you can ask. But
Mhm.
otherwise, you have work to do and you can't play until it's done. And, after a couple of those arguments where a child will cry, they understand that you mean business.
Good. And now, can I hire you to come to my house to help me?
I have done that for parents
but
before.
you, but
It's
no,
teenagers usually. Wait till they get to that age.
now you work with children from what age to what age? When does this all? Is there a certain cutoff point where you work with children until, or what is considered adolescent? And
Actually, the laws for special education cover birth
okay,
to adulthood, which is usually 21.
okay,
However, I do work with adults that have disabilities as well. If they have a developmental disability, That means that whatever they have that impedes their learning or their life will not go away. So while they might learn and get better at what they do,
Hmm.
they will always be a little delayed from everybody else. So they need supports throughout their lifetime. I work with adults as well. I think the next time we get together, we'll
Oh,
talk about the adult services because it's a whole different set of laws, and it's a whole different set of services for when individuals with disabilities become
now,
adults.
what have you seen with this past year with the homeschooling aspect of children with special needs? What has happened? How are parents able to help these children in need being home? I mean, what happened this past year? Can you explain?
Homeschooling, actually, I think those parents might have had it a little bit easier because they already have their routine for learning set up. And sometimes, a lot of times, parents choose to homeschool because their child has a disability and they're not successful in a regular school environment. So they keep their children at home and teach them there. So the special needs, if they have special needs, the local school district is still required by law to provide services.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah,
So they were still available coming to the houses or doing virtual sessions as
virtual,
well. Okay.
not the virtual.
Got
Yes.
it. Did you see an added increase in anxiety and stress amongst children? And
Oh, across the board, there is. And not only that, for going back to school as well.
mhm.
All of us have been sort of cocooned in our homes, and now children that have been out of school and away from friends, or children like your child that are in kindergarten and haven't even had that opportunity, they need to learn, relearn all of those school behaviors and expectations. They don't have that flexible schedule. They can't get up in the middle of the teacher talking about something to get a drink.
Yeah,
So it's going to take an adjustment for everybody.
great. So what else about Square Peg Ed did you want to share with our listeners today?
That, well, I can be reached in different ways. I
Sure.
have, as far as my expert witness practice, which seems to take up most of my time as of late. I am listed in a few different publications. There's um, expert witness directories. One of those is with an organization called Seek,
Okay.
because they do training for expert witnesses to help you understand courtroom practice or deposition practice. And so I'm listed in some of those directories as well. And that's how it, but most of it's word of mouth.
Really?
Yeah, I think most parents, don't you learn things about like
Yeah, you're right.
neighborhood, your school, like once you have a child in school, the whole world opens up.
I know. Yes, absolutely. You're right about that. I'm just learning. My other one is 4 too, so he does pre-K this year. So I guess I will be learning more shortly. So the school districts, attorneys, anyone needs an expert witness, they can go to squarepeged.com. And by the way, what type of, as being an expert witness, what type of credentials do you need? Would you mind just sharing the credentials that you do have? I know there's a lot, which is good.
Yeah, I do have a number of credentials. I'm licensed as a special education administrator in multiple states. That helps because you need to know the law. I also have a doctorate degree in educational leadership with a specialization in special education. And then work experience does a lot for expertise as well. Just the fact that I have 30 years behind me means that I've seen an awful lot.
Yeah.
And I understand a lot of those complications. So, and then I also stay up to date on all of the latest research because that's what opinions are based on, is research.
Now, let me ask you this because I remember, 20 something years ago when I was, well, gosh, more than that, I'm 43. But years ago, special education, did it not exist in schools? Were they trying to conform children into what? When did special education become developed and to the extent it has now with all the laws and the government involved?
Yes, we didn't have special education, so to speak, before. What we did was we removed children or we didn't send them to school. Parents were sometimes told, you should institutionalize your child because they have special needs and you won't be able to handle them. And so a lot of children were just institutionalized. And we have changed our thoughts on that. And in the 70s is when special education law started to come into focus, where we realized that taking children away and removing them from their families and from their communities isn't a good way to support people. It's not humane.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, school districts still exclude children with special education. You often find the special education rooms in the basement or near the gym where there aren't any other classrooms.
Yeah.
But for the most part, schools are pretty good about really understanding that every child has a huge potential.
Yeah.
And it's our duty to offer them the buffet to choose from.
That's beautifully said. It really is. That was beautiful, Kate, to wrap it up for today. So just to remind everyone to contact you, squarepeged.com. And you want to give out a phone number, email address?
My phone number is 603-828-6179.
Perfect. And to leave everyone today, what would you like to share?
If you need help, just ask. There's people that are willing to give it.
Perfect. And especially people like you, Kate Panaccione. Thank you again. You have a fantastic day. And thank you for doing what you do. I know you're busy to take out the time here with us today, but to enlighten our audience, it's super important. And I commend you. Thank you. You have a great day. And to everyone else, the same. Stay tuned. More of the show is on the way. Don't go anywhere.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
Mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house. And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned.
This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.